it has affected the fairness of the proceedings. It is not a fact, but the perception is still there, and that is a matter for very great regret, as far as I am concerned.
And if I may, I don't mean to feed that perception by my question, but your response does raise, in my mind, the question, and what role, if any, is there for the tribunal in addressing that perception about negative effects?
The role of the tribunal in that respect is very, very clear. It must ensure that no measure is adopted at the expense of the rights of the accused person. That is the best answer that the tribunal can give.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to ask the registrar now a little bit about what kind of support is necessary and from what actors. I mean, it's been touched on over the last few days in terms of maximizing and ensuring the legacy of the tribunal. What's your vision of that, Mr. Hawking?
Thanks, Richard. I don't know if it's the lights or if it's your question, but I tell you, it's very hot up here.
If I may, I do think the World Forum ought to reduce its charge to the tribunal on the basis of the temperature in this room alone. I apologize to all of you in the audience. All I can say is that those of us up here, and I appreciate your comment, John, are about to melt. I would be glad to lend my legal skills to negotiations with World Forum management on a rate reduction. But please, Mr. Registrar, continue.
Thank you. I've bought myself some time to reflect on your question. I see, Richard, three elements to this. I mean, there's three key aspects where we need support. And the first is institutional support. The tribunal itself has to recognise the key role it plays in defining its legacy, and what we do over the next months and over the next few years will truly define how we will be remembered. So it's up to us as an institution to work on cementing our legacy, and I think this conference is a very good example of the commitment that we have as an institution to do exactly that. The second aspect is, of course, local actors, players, actors in the former Yugoslavia itself, and these are vast. We've heard a lot about that over the last 2 days. They go from the political element to the judicial aspect of society, civil society, and of course the grassroots level. And I think we've heard pretty much views from all aspects of the former Yugoslavia over the last day and a half. I think one of the things that perhaps just touching on the nature of that relationship between the ICTY and the region, because that's been discussed a lot today, and I've heard things like partnership, cooperation. I heard, I think it was the Deputy Prosecutor talked about it being a symbiotic relationship. I mean, I think what's key is it has to be a very good, open, transparent, professional relationship. And what I've taken positively out of this conference is that within the criminal justice world in the former Yugoslavia, the political councils for cooperation with the various states in the former Yugoslavia and the tribunal, there is a very, very healthy, good working relationship where we are assisting both of us, and that's what I've taken. Where I see us falling down, and I think it's been quite marked, is more at the grassroots level. And I think that only shows what I've had concerns about since I became registrar, how important our outreach activities are and how we really have to refocus, revamp our outreach work. I think in the words of the young, someone was telling me, is to big it up. We have to, I probably got that wrong. Anyway, we have to really, it's a Jamaican phrase. Well, a young Jamaican has, we really need to strengthen our outreach work. And that means at the grassroots level, truly the grassroots level, because I think that is where we need to put in all the energy. The third element to what's important to the Tribunal's legacy is the continued support of the international community, and this touches on the issue about whether the completion strategy would affect the fairness of our proceedings, etc. It was a truly visionary step back in 1993, and I think we have to acknowledge this, that those who came up with the idea of an ICTY back in 1993, it was truly visionary. And the support that the ICTY has had from the international community since then has ensured that we have got to where we are today, which I think is beyond the wildest dreams of those who first thought of us as an institution, as a response to what was happening then in the former Yugoslavia. So that continued support, we can't do anything without the support of states, both the United Nations, member states, the Security Council of the United Nations, the European Union. That is still very important for us.
Right. And I can only imagine, again, in the context of the completion strategy, the receptivity that might exist when you go to the Fifth Committee at United Nations headquarters and make the argument that in terms of the legacy of this institution being carried forward and the importance of outreach and other functions, that some of the member states give you at best a blank stare.
To their defence, I mean, our budget has been adopted basically in its entirety for the next biennium, so I must give credit to the Fifth Committee and the ACABQ. They have approved our budget. As the prosecutor says, it shows a substantial downsizing over the next 2 years. 60% in the Office of the Prosecutor, 40% in the Tribunal, Tribunal-wide.
Okay, thank you. I'm mindful of the time. I do want to ask Professor Steinberg, as our academic in residence, if he wants to share any thoughts with us in regard to legacy and how you, from where you sit as a member of a law faculty, see this legacy unfolding in a temporal sense. I mean, what do you think are the important benchmarks for it?
Well, asking the question in the temporal sense is important because there's a long-term and a short-term here. And the long-term unfolding of the legacy is something that's going to take place over many decades. And, of course, there are things that need to be done now and things that need to be done later. Can illustrate this across what I think are three crucial issues for the Tribunal's legacy and for the positive effects it can bring to the region and to the world. It's been the first issue is the issue of scaling up prosecutorial size and ability, capacity in the region, which is absolutely crucial to establishing the facts about what's occurred and is a crucial element of any potential reconciliation. I think that's very clear from the victims groups that have spoken out in the last few days. Until people are brought to justice and held to account, reconciliation will not be possible. Now, there are relatively short-term things that need to be done. The capacity-building conversation today is very important. There's no way to reach the scale of cases that need to be dealt with without increasing the resources for these prosecutors. But there are two other problems that I think are longer-term problems in order to bring this about. One of them has been alluded to, but there's been some back and forth about it, and that's the idea of cooperation between Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia, where while the cooperation is clearly better than it has been, there are still areas where the region needs to cooperate in extradition, parallel proceedings, and witness safety. And that's a longer-term problem. And a still longer-term problem is the political and constitutional structure in Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, which I think partly due to a combination of the norms in the region and the consociational structure has led to the problem of the RS in certain circumstances interfering with the mission of the Special Unit for War Crimes, the Office of the Prosecutor, by effectively threatening the budget, by asking that the internationals leave, by not fully implementing the 2003 sentencing law. Those kinds of issues to really solve the problem and allow the prosecutions to take place in the scale they need to take place are long-term problems. They're going to require, I think, this constant background of leverage being exerted by the European Union for accession to really start to resolve them. In the interest of time, I just want to address one other issue that illustrates the short-term and the long-term, and that's the issue of information. Right, the archives, accessibility to them is a long-term problem. The information centers, a medium-term problem. A short-term problem that has not been discussed about information here, and I think it's a very important point, is the construction of the website, which, while is a fabulous website, doesn't, I think, fully reach the broader global public. 50,000 people a month visit that website, far more than visit the tribunal itself. That is the public face. Of the 4 million pages of documents on the website, only 15,000 are searchable by Google. The registration rule, which doesn't perform very many functions, and those functions can be formed in other ways, prohibit Google searching of the 150,000 court documents. Most people under 30 years old are going to learn about this tribunal from the World Wide Web, and certainly at any distance. Little things like that. Changing the architecture. A third or half the space is taken up by the news section, which is a link to press briefings, right? There's a story about the conflict. There's a story about the ICTY that can be told from merely aggregating the judicial notice from the cases themselves. It's not the history, it's not the whole truth, but it is a set of facts that is part of the legacy, and to reach the world, that website, in the short term, can be reconstituted.
For that, I do know that Minister Simonovic wants to comment.
I just wanted to thank you, Richard, for bringing into perspective a short and long-term perspective, because it does help us to resolve conflicts of interests that does not seem to be possible to solve other way. You just mentioned the issue which was very sensitive yesterday, the issue of archives, where are they going to be located? And we have had very emotional but also very serious discussions on what to do with archives. And if we do not put that in short-term and long-term perspective, then, you know, we have a conflict of interest among stakeholders that cannot be resolved. If we take into account short-term and long-term perspective, then we shall all agree that immediately there should be accessibility of the archives by all victims' organizations, all interested people in the region and elsewhere.